Thomas is doing a little bit of a dance there. I know you guys couldn't see that on the live stream, but that's what happens when we get together for the Business Communicators. But welcome to season 4, episode 2 of the Business Communicators, the #1 podcast in the world for communications and marketing professionals. And my name is Austin Staton, joined alongside the dancer this week, Thomas Bain, the co-host. And on this journey, as we explore the world of communications and discuss the key issues and trends that impact our industry. And Hattie Horn is traveling this week. She's actually in Hilton Head for a breast cancer walk. We look forward to having her back on the mic soon and hearing information on Hilton Head and how it is in the fall. So maybe she can give us some tourist tips or something like that. But Thomas, how's the week going on your end?
The week's going phenomenal on my end. The little dance, I'm enjoying our little intro music that has on the background of it. I always like to tell people, if you know you're going to go on stage to present or something like that, do something to psych yourself up. You've always heard of the mommy made me mash my M&Ms. Do something just to kind of loosen the mood. You're already stressed enough. Everybody else is there to have a good time. So dance away. I just felt like for whatever reason it struck me, so I got to dance. Maybe we'll have a dance off one of these days.
I don't know that the viewers want to see the dance off, but if you do, drop it in the comments below. If you're watching this right now on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, or Twitter, let us know about your dance skills. And you can't see it in the green room right now, but our guest here in just a few moments, Ethan, is actually dancing on screen, and we wish we could put it up, but we'll get to him in just a few moments. But we had amazing feedback from the first episode of season 4, where we spoke on employee engagement with Stephanie Asen and Monica Silva. We kind of want to follow up on that episode with insights into the workplace through data and metrics, and we'll dive into that in just a moment with Integral CEO Ethan McCarty. And before we do that, we want to thank today's episode sponsor, IBC Houston. And from now until November 12th, IBC is offering, or IBC members can take advantage of a 20% discount on dues with code IBC21. IBC is offering the tools and resources to help you grow as a business communicator, whether you're looking to take your next career move or want to develop in your current one. So renew your membership or join IBC and make a commitment to learning, connecting, and having the resources you need for years to come. Again, the code is IBC21, and that provides a 20% discount on international dues to anyone who renews their membership. And also here in Houston, IBC Houston is having their annual Bronze Quill Awards on Thursday. So be sure to check that out. Information is on ibchouston.com. But Thomas, if people want to follow us, how can they connect and engage with the Business Communicators?
Follow us on the podcast and all the big platforms. iTunes is probably the most famous of them all. Just search the Business Communicators. We are the #1 business communications podcast in the world.
Yeah, it's a verifiable fact.
Yes. Some countries are a little lower than 1, but we're working on that all the way across the board. Other things, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, MySpace. Not really, but we should start a MySpace page now that I think about it.
Actually, I think we should start a TikTok page, because I think your dance moves would really crush it on TikTok. I mean, maybe you could come after Charlie D'Amelio, Addison Rae, but maybe that could be a plan. Or maybe Ethan, Ethan here in just a few moments could join and maybe help us start that that account. But he actually just he dropped it in the private chat. Too late for Friendster. So I don't know. Maybe a little too late.
The problem is my dance moves are pretty limited, so it looked like a boomerang, but reality is just the one move I've got. The other one I was thinking of is AOL Instant Messenger. We've got to go back old school. Somebody mentioned that the other day in conversation.
Yeah, Matt seconded.
But all the major social media platforms follow us. Also go to our website. We're always looking for conversation. We try to be as engaging as possible. And we're also human. So if we say something that's totally off the wall, please correct us on it.
Yeah, absolutely. We're not geniuses, although we try to appear that way sometimes. But Thomas, you and I are data nerds, and I don't think that's any secret from the time that I had you on season 1 of the podcast, way back in the day. And I know we're both going to love our guest this week, who is the founder and CEO of Integral, an employee activation agency serving leaders of communications, HR, marketing, and technology at organizations, global and local alike. He is formerly the global head of employee innovation communications for Bloomberg LP and global director of social strategy for IBM. He has more than 20 years of experience leading digital communications, engagement, and marketing initiatives at scale. I could go on and on and on about his resume, but let's go ahead and bring him in right now. Ethan McCarty. Ethan, welcome to the Business Communicators podcast.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. I was enjoying doing some power poses and some moves at your suggestion, Thomas. So thank you for that. I'm feeling very energized now.
I love it. I love it. And by the way, there's a Twitter account that I think became very popular during COVID-19 pandemic. It was called Room Raider, And I can just say that my background right now is very plain because I've got a pantry right here. I've got the laundry room right here. And Thomas, you just got the white wall. But Ethan, you've got the brick background. You've got the plant. I mean, if you're rating your Zoom background on a scale of 1 to 10, where do you put it?
I don't know, but I'm just saying, I think you open up the pantry, open up the laundry, just add a little bit of texture there. And Thomas, I got nothing for you, buddy. I mean, like, I don't know, draw on the wall.
Well, in my defense, I literally just bought my house about 2 months ago, and my desk, my computer desk, literally got delivered yesterday. So I figured I was going to start with the desk, then I was going to do bookshelves behind me.
There you go.
And then and start to get that depth in there. But financial responsibility kicks me. Don't go run the credit card for a bunch of furniture.
Unless you're trying to get credit card points. So if you have a sign-up bonus, I don't know. Maybe we'll do another podcast on that. Ethan, we're really excited to have you on, and of course you're the CEO at Integral. Can you tell us a little bit about what your day-to-day looks like for you?
Sure. Well, I mean, the day-to-day, obviously running a kind of a boutique agency every day is quite different, and that's sort of why I wanted to start the firm in the first place, is to get to kind of live out there in the world in a way that was not just within one organization. As you noted in my biography, I'd gone deep with a couple different organizations, with IBM and with Bloomberg, and it's just really exciting to spend time with clients who are in different industries and different regions and have very different cultures. So my day to day, like, I have to say, I'm pretty happy with how we get to operate as a team at Integral as well. And I have the real privilege to work with superstars. I mean, a number of people who've cast their lot with me to get this startup off the ground are just phenomenal people. So being in their presence and their company and learning from them is a real treat.
Yeah, I mean, you've got a really talented team, and last week on the podcast we spoke on employee engagement, and this week you've kind of got the data to show what employees are actually thinking, why what employees are thinking actually matters.
Yeah.
Can you give us maybe some insights into this polling and report that you guys did, and maybe kind of what went into the research behind it and why you decided to undertake this project?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the question. And, so I guess I would rewind quite a bit to say, I was a consumer of research like what we've undertaken. So when I was leading, big employee programs at IBM and at Bloomberg and so on, I was a recipient of those reports from, big consultancies that were looking at engagement, or they were looking at sort of morale or happiness, or these various different dimensions, trust, and I always found them very interesting and compelling and useful. Though there were the linkage that I had been drawing in my day-to-day work between communications, the culture, the confidence that people have in themselves, and the kind of overlap of identities that we experience, our personal identities, our work identities, and so on. And all that, the confluence of those things lead to whether or not you'll take an action, whether your behavior will change. And I've always thought of communications as like a very powerful lever to pull, to encourage people to take certain changes, to feel confident in themselves and a strategy and so on, and then be able to execute on that. But I didn't see, I really didn't see survey instruments out there or research out there that really knit those concepts together. And so that was one of the things, even in founding Integral, more than 4 years ago, I had in mind that I wanted to develop some net new research that would be less oriented around internal and communications, two constructs that I think have, kind of lived a very happy and long life, but may be, sort of out of time, by comparison to employee activation. Employees, like, there's a very known relationship between, like, I'm doing some kind of work for pay, and then activation, the action I will take. And so that's where we developed, 4 or 5 different areas that we wanted to inspect. And then, I looked for, I wanted to do it right. And so I waited until Integral had enough, frankly, enough resources to enlist the help of an organization like the Harris Poll, who are very well known for, if they're doing a broad sampling, that it's going to be a really great sampling, that the research will be done with the right kind of rigor. I had the privilege to work with a guy named Rob Yakelik, who's a friend of mine through the Institute for Public Relations and through the Page Society. So we co-developed that, and actually our mutual friend Kari McLean had a big hand in it, as did John Buchholz on my team. And we really sort of thought through, well, what are these dimensions? Is it, do I believe in the company's values? Well, maybe that's not so important as, does the company's values match my own values? And do I feel like the company's taking a stand on issues? Well, maybe that's less important than, is the company taking a stand on issues that matter to me? And other kind of vectors of perception amongst employees that would potentially lead them to take an action on behalf of an organization or even against that organization's interests. And so we started to come up with a pick list of some of those things as well, like advocating for the company or warning a candidate away and these kind of things. And so at the end of this study, where we got more than 2,000 fully employed Americans to participate in the study, we did get some really, really powerful data that gives us a sense for what's really on people's minds right now. What are their expectations when they come to work? How do they feel when they come to work? And how does that actually lead to their willingness to advocate for their organization, and or even follow, the sort of basic, if you will, instructions that every employee gets, like around health and safety and security and so on.
Yeah, I thought it was absolutely fascinating just reading through the reports and the data. And again, we'll share a link to this. If you're listening on iTunes or Spotify, we'll share a link to the Employee Activation Index in the show notes below. So to scroll down and take a look at it. But I know that there has been a lot of companies out there that do pulse surveys, right? The pulse surveys maybe look into how the company feels about leadership, how they feel on certain company messaging. But to me, this is a little bit different. It was really getting into societal issues, which I thought was fascinating. And we had Ron Carucci, who is a New York Times best-selling author, on the podcast in season 3. And he said something that really stuck out to me. It was, you are not just looking for your next job. You're hiring your next boss. And he said, don't be afraid to ask the hard questions. Don't be so desperate to choose or to get chosen that you forfeit your own values and needs. And so kind of taking what you know from the findings of this report, given the circumstances of 2020 and the COVID-19 pandemic, do you think employees or the job force have maybe more leverage on finding the right employer now more than ever?
Oh, there's no question. The answer to that is yes. And I had a kind of lecture that I did. I teach employee activation at Columbia, but one of the lectures that I did, years ago, was how the introduction of digital and global platforms were changing a historic asymmetry of power between employees and employers, and that shift was going to move gradually in favor of particularly highly skilled workers or people with unique unique professional networks and so on, that could be leveraged for their benefit as opposed to uniquely for the employer's benefit. And things like, LinkedIn being a more valuable, Rolodex, if you will, than the employee directory, access to capital through things like Kickstarter, access to training through, Lynda, YouTube, all these different, self-training mechanisms. The list goes on, where the introduction of these platforms has made it, the value proposition of working for a big employer or even a small employer to some degree, less clear, because you can still, if you are an ambitious person with some skills, you can operate on a global stage without those things. Now, the pandemic absolutely accelerated that. I mean, like, what I thought was going to happen in 5 years happened essentially in between January and March.
Right.
Or January and April of 2020. I mean, it really, really made us boogie. And so one of the things that happened then, because of that compression, is people start to look at other differentiating factors which they were already considering when hiring their next boss, as you said. And I really like that because one of the things that we've been saying is that employees are actually consumers of work. And to create, just as you must create a differentiated experience for your consumers or for your customers in a commercial sense, for if you're going to attract the best talent, particularly in a moment where there is a labor shortage in many industries and kind of like a resorting of the labor force, you have to be able to differentiate. And when we asked people if they felt their values, their personal values and their employer's values were aligned, more than a third, so 36% said no. And that is an enormous risk. And as you'll see, if we go a little bit deeper into the data, as you'll see that there's all kinds of knock-on effects to that misalignment that are extremely consequential to the employer.
So I think back over time of all the different business revolutions where focusing on the employee is important. You had Henry Ford when he started the thing, increasing worker pay and giving in days off so people could enjoy the product that they're using. And then you kind of see over time how the employee kind of became the afterthought. And so I'm applauding this research because I think it's great that we're starting to look at employee marketing the marketing. How do we communicate with our employees and how you break it down by the different segments? So what would be your points of view to a company starting off about how to either launch a voice of employee company or process, or activate, and what to do with that information as it comes across?
That's a great question. And what I keep on telling people is you probably have a communications budget that is highly over-indexed on kind of the broadcast, the messaging, the kind of channels, the delivery or the delivery of content, and even sometimes the interruption of, the worker or the employee. Take a look at that budget and see how much, can you get 15 or 20% of it oriented around sensing, listening, perceiving, understanding what employees value. And in so doing, you can start to say like, okay, with that knowledge, we could create policies, we could create programs, we could, structure our workforce, our leadership could stand up for various things that actually our workforce, we know they care about because we asked them. When we asked people, we gave people a list of 25 different issues to select that they thought that it would be important for their organization to make a positive difference on. And the list of 20 things like voting rights and sexual harassment and small business growth and abortion issues, Israel, Palestine. I mean, like we really ran the gamut. Second Amendment rights, and what came up first in the top 5, it was employees, good health and well-being, which had a monster lead. 40% of people put that in the number 1 spot. The second was job creation. The third was racial inequity, discrimination, prejudice and bias. The fourth was data privacy. And the fifth was gender and wage leadership gap. And so, we had thought, things like environmentalism would show up there, but, we have some theories about why those things showed up. And, to your point about like, what can even a small organization do with that kind of knowledge, knowing that, I mean, like the fact that health and well-being and economic security were at the top. I mean, it's kind of no wonder we're in a moment where there's, systemic failures on top of systemic failures. Who's going to take care of me even as an adult, that's like a very fair question to ask. And you look at your employer and you're like, maybe you can help. And then, for obvious reasons, the racial, the kind of reckoning that the United States is having with systemic racism. So it makes sense that landed high on the list. So that's an important one. Data privacy is one that surprised us all, but now it just makes perfect sense. Every day you're reading about a breach here, a breach there, a hack here, a hack there. And meanwhile, what do we message to employees? Protect the mothership. Don't get caught in a phishing scam, protect our clients. Meanwhile, who's got more data on you than your employer? It's like they know your compensation. Yeah. Well, maybe Facebook, sure. But, they know a lot about you. And so, even a small organization to be able to say to your employees, look, we're taking your data privacy really seriously. And then, and then last but not least on that list, just to close out the top 5, one of the things that we found very heartening was that there was a almost exact 50-50 split, even of men and women who put gender pay and leadership equity as one of their top 5 issues.
I think one of the other challenges is to make sure whoever's responsible for surveying or collecting the surveys check their bias at the door. I like to use the pizza example. Hey, we're ordering pizza for the department. Yes, you get a cheese, you get a pepperoni, and you get the Supreme. But whoever's ordering the pizza loves Supreme, so half the pizzas are Supreme, and yet only one pizza of Supreme gets eaten.
That's right. That's right. It's funny that you mentioned that, because when we were coming up with that pick list, I mean, I'll cop to it. I'm a Brooklyn kind of liberal guy, and my list had certain things on it and did not have certain things on it. And we reviewed it with one of Integral's board members, and he said, "Wow, you guys are really showing some liberal bias here." And so we made sure to add, we went back and revised the list and added some of the things. So not just like gun violence, but also Second Amendment rights. And so it is really helpful, I think, Thomas, to get that. That second set of eyes, ask people. And, one of the things I think is always a really good practice is when you're doing some kind of research, if you can, ask some of the people who you're going to ask what should be in the survey. And I rarely see that happen. Some of our customers, our Integral's clients have formed employee councils that, we can, actually go in and test ideas with that group of people and survey, that kind of thing. Again, it's not something, you don't have to be a $1 billion company to do something like that, to have a group of people who are committed employees who want to invest in the future of the employee experience, and there are others, to get them together once a month by lunch and ask, hey, we're going to do these things,
Only make sure lunch is all the heavy duty vegetable pizzas.
That's right. That's right. Get the Supremes.
Get the Supremes that only 1 or 2 people in the whole room will actually eat.
Don't let Thomas order your pizza.
No, I do not like Supreme pizza.
If there's one takeaway that you have from today's podcast, it's not the data and insights that Ethan's sharing. It's Thomas on his pizza picks. But
yes, do not order Supreme pizza.
I feel like that there's like a data experiment to be had right there, Thomas.
100% agree. Even though reading through your survey, 2 things came to mind. One, I never saw you ask anything about foosball tables or ping pong tables in the office. I'm hoping that as a business society, we're finally starting to get past that. Yes, your business should be fun, but no, it should not be distracting the whole time. The other thing was on your topic of children in the household. I just had flashbacks when you talk about the January through March timeframe. All the people are like, "Oh, I have this hobby and I'm going to do this in my free time," and I'm like, "I have kids. I want to kill everybody that that is setting all these hobbies." So, what are some of the big takeaways that you got? I guess let's just start with people with children, and what are some of the things that people are looking for?
Well, before I talk about kids, I want to talk about foosball tables, because I will say it's really funny because prior to the pandemic, we spent a lot of time on site with our clients, and you fly out to whatever their office location is, and it's always really important, I feel, if you can, to spend some time in the building, or like walk on the factory floor if you can, or if we're going to understand what's going on in an organization. And we came to the conclusion that the presence of foosball tables was a diagnostic for a failed culture effort. And it's almost always the case. It's like you walk by and you're like, wow, there's the room with the foosball tables with nobody playing them. Now, on the contrary, we actually had a couple clients who had really pretty elaborate, let's say, kind of like, I don't want to say entertainment spaces, but more like energy recharging spaces that you could see they clearly consulted the employees on their design. So one client of ours, a big bank in Colorado, they had a meditation room, and it was like, right, well, that totally makes sense. Like you would want that. I could see that, wanting to just have like a quiet space with some privacy, and it was really beautifully, rendered. And another client of ours, a big technology company on the West Coast, they had a game room that was really oriented around, it had big screens, it was really oriented around soccer. They had a huge population, soccer and cricket, a huge population of folks from Southeast Asia who were, they were just fanatics for cricket and soccer. And so they designed the space around them, and it wasn't the dusty foosball table. Anyway, back to parents. The thing that kind of blew me away was how much more likely parents are to be kind of activated on behalf of or against an organization. So we did ask people, look, if you've got kids in the house or you don't have kids in the house. And now what we don't know is, the folks who don't have kids in the house, they could be empty nesters, or they could be people who decided not to have children, but, so we don't know, we can't really generalize about them, but we can say that if you have kids in the house, your likelihood to be involved in a mentoring program is 71% by comparison to 56% for those without kids in the house. Your likelihood to buy company stock is 51% by comparison to 34%. But also on the inverse, you're twice as likely to advocate for unionization. You're almost twice as likely to provide a negative review on Glassdoor, for example. And then another kind of maybe weird thing about what we discovered is that the folks who have kids in the house were 18% of them reported a likelihood of showing up in the morning feeling tired, and only 13% of those with kids in the house reported that. That totally doesn't track with me. I've got a 6-year-old and a 9-year-old who make me very, very tired. But what did track with me was that there's a much higher likelihood that folks with kids in the house want to return to the office. And lo and behold, here I am in my office, happily far away from my children. I can't wait to see them this weekend, but not during the workday.
We had a coworker back in the day. So working from home is actually not something relatively new, because here in Houston, we obviously have floods, and during Hurricane Harvey, the company that I work for, the building flooded. So we had to work from home for like 5 months. And we always joke around about this one guy who had kids. We're like, he's probably like canoeing into the office right now, trying to get there. But I thought that was interesting. But Ethan,
amazing. Just get me I will go through the flood. Just get me away from the screaming toddler. Right?
Exactly. But Ethan, one of the things that the report finds is that, and you guys have this in the report, is that taking a proactive approach to understanding employee sensitivities regarding social and political issues will help organizations build more inclusive cultures. And I find this a bit interesting because for so long, we were taught not to talk, social issues, politics, religion, that kind of thing at work. But I feel that it's more and more of a trend that we're starting to see. And you kind of highlight that a little bit with generational differences in the report. But we still know that regardless of whatever the issue is, half the country is going to believe one thing and half the country is going to believe another thing. So kind of two questions here. How do companies go about being proactive in this space to not isolate one group or the other? And maybe how can we have meaningful dialogue without worrying about, polarizing the workforce or this cancel culture?
Yeah, those are really great questions. And it is the case. Our study found that almost exactly down the middle, it's like 48% of people said that, yeah, you should have the kind of right to express your political views at work. And 50% of people said, I feel comfortable expressing my political views at work. So it is a 50-50 split. And we did find, though, that it skews higher the sort of younger the participant was. So the millennials and Gen Zers were much more likely to believe that they should have the right to speak their mind about political issues at work, and that they felt comfortable doing so. So just strategically, if you're trying to engage a next generation of workforce, you are going to want to be thinking about policies and spaces in the workplace to create that kind of dialogue. What you're describing really reminds me of an experience I had when I was leading employee communications for Bloomberg during the time of Brexit, which was a monstrously polarizing issue for the UK. As you know, the vote came down to like 49-51, and it was just barely through. We had 3,000 employees more or less in the London area. And, we had people who were sitting at these long desks together, and somebody who's, literally like all they have in between them is like a little low wall. On one side, it would be a Brexiteer, and the other side would be they call it Remain, the people who wanted to stay in the European Union. And there was a lot of dialogue and discourse about like, okay, well, how do we create the right level of dialogue here without it becoming an obnoxious and toxic workplace. Now, we decided at Bloomberg at the time, because we have so many journalists, we have so many analysts, we have people who really need to engage in that debate, that it was correct to our culture to enable and encourage that. Though we did have to message about, well, what does that mean? What kind of, like how big of a statue of, or big of a flag, whatever thing you want to put on your desk, how big can you do that? Where are we going to have these conversations? What does that mean? So I think it does really come down to organizational culture, but I would say that the strategic play here is to create spaces in which you can have that kind of conversation, even if it's polarizing. I would say though, understanding, so running an instrument like we've done, with the Integral Employee Activation Index within an organization, to understand which issues are actually motivating and important to your people can be very helpful. And you don't have to make promises that you would then go and do stuff around it, but you may find that, well, look, a lot of our employees really care about, say, LGBTQ issues. Let's make sure that we have, that we align our philanthropy to that. Let's make sure that we align our policies to that, and so on. I mean, take a look at what's going down at Netflix right now. I was
about to ask you about that. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, and I think it's really, it's very interesting. I haven't actually watched the Chappelle special yet. I heard some of the buzz around it, but it's, you can see that, employees have tremendous leverage, particularly at that kind of high end of the labor market, where there's, intense demand for those skills. Anybody with Netflix on their resume can write their own ticket. So you better be listening to them.
At the same time, though, you've got Netflix, who has basically said, all right, we're paying this guy $20 million because he brings in subscribers. And then at the same time, you look at another company that's going through similar controversies, if you will, with Spotify and Joe Rogan. And Joe Rogan, the number one podcast in the world. We're the number one comms podcast, but he has the number one podcast overall. But he is getting, millions and millions of people listening to his show on a daily basis. He's a huge revenue generator, probably, for Spotify. I mean, they paid him $100 million to bring his show over to their platform. But there are a lot of employees that aren't happy with some of the comments that he makes, some of the guests that he has on. Like, how do you balance that as a company? Now, I know not all companies going to have like entertainment arms, for their business, but for the Netflix and the Spotify's, like, how do you balance a clear profit generator with maybe somebody that doesn't align with the company's beliefs overall?
Yeah, well, I think, I have to give Netflix credit for, and again, like I'm reading about this. I don't really know what all's going on because I haven't seen the special itself. But with the Netflix example, I got to give them credit because they have said I read their statement, that essentially they don't believe that there is a very strong linkage between what's on the screen and the behaviors that people exhibit, and also that comedians are social critics and deserve a wide berth in order to spur dialogue. And to me, I'm like, okay, yeah, that sounds like they're actually sticking with their values. And there may be people who, as a result of that, decide, yeah, Netflix not the place for me. And so I think there's some courage to conviction that happens in these moments that could be a healthy sorting, both for employees and for the employers. The thing that I would say though is like, know what those values are, know what your employees' values are, and understand where they overlap. Because when people feel that alignment with their personal values and their organization's values, they are 2 times more likely to show up to work feeling confident, grateful, and motivated. And meanwhile, when you don't have that alignment, you're 2.5 times more likely to show up to work feeling tired, indifferent, and underappreciated. And that those mindsets going into work every day lead to actual action. So those who feel that alignment are twice as likely to stay with the organization during challenging times, go the extra mile for a client or colleague, help people outside of their immediate team, defend the company during a crisis, engage in mentoring, volunteering, and charitable donations. So it just doubles the likelihood of those positive impacts. Meanwhile, it minimizes the likelihood of those negative impacts. So, and on that point, people who don't feel that that values alignment, they believe that their colleagues, their teammates, 25% are ready to warn a candidate that the organization is a lousy place to work, to outright quit, not comply with organizational policies. 21% are ready to protest or walk out, as we're seeing at both United very recently, United Airlines and the pilots there, and then also at Netflix. 21% say that a teammate wouldn't follow safety protocols. 20% said they would post that a colleague would post a negative review or disclose confidential information. And then the most stunning of all, 17%, they would believe that a teammate would actually sabotage the organization. So you can see that values alignment is not just about like, do I feel good at work, but like literally translates into the actions I would take for or against an employer. And you think about not following safety protocols, like in manufacturing, can you imagine the injury and costly like setbacks and just the destruction that can happen, or the disclosure of confidential information in the security business or banking or healthcare? So this is not just values are a feel-good thing. You can see that it is actually driving business outcomes.
You mentioned unions, and you mentioned walkouts, and reading the news that from Barron's today that Kellogg and Battle Creek might have a walkout or a strike coming on theirs wrong time with the challenges in the delivery chain. How do you recommend communicating with different groups or organizations that you can't necessarily communicate with, or to your point, say, hey, we can't have these safety issues taking place because of unions or other agreements that are in place?
Well, the technical practice of labor relations is a real science, and there's a real discipline there. And that's, it's incredibly important to understand that, organized labor has for the last several decades been kind of on its back foot and in decline. And we are in a moment when there is both the political atmosphere and, as we were just talking about, the societal atmosphere for organized labor to start to work in very different and more visible ways. And so, again, I would just go back to that very essential practice that we're recommending, is to understand the employee population, not as a homogenous group, not as a one-size-fits-all group, but to actually do that listening, do that segmentation, understand whether you have 100 people or 150,000 people, there are likely segments that have very different motivators who kind of need to understand the world vis-a-vis work in different ways, and may have different expectations around policies, their relationship with their colleagues and other divisions and so on. And it is fundamentally impossible to expect that those people will produce great outcomes if they're showing up to work with that kind of negative viewpoint of the organization's values.
I like the comment that Kari dropped in the chat. I'll put it back up on the screen if you're watching right now on our social platforms, but especially knowing that with companies who have locations across a wide geographic area, not even country to country or county to county. And I think that's 100% true. And I've recommended this book several times, but Aaron Meyer wrote a book on the culture map, how we communicate differently across different parts of the world, and it's 100% true. And Ethan, I think one thing that's really stood out to me over the past 18 to 20 months is ESG, and how much that has really driven companies and CEOs are being more active on issues, not only with the environment, but on government or governance, on social issues. I'm curious, from your research and maybe just overall insights, how do you recommend maybe CEOs, or how would you, advise CEOs when it comes to social activism? I mean, some CEOs, I feel, are more equipped to discuss the key issues that are impacting the culture and society on a day-to-day basis, where others, maybe their board or company wants them to do that, but they don't feel comfortable. Maybe they're more looking at the bottom line. What's your advice to CEOs on that activism front?
Yeah, well, it's funny. There's kind of a historical, let's say, kind of legacy of founders or senior execs kind of doing checkbook charity. They're out playing golf with whoever, sealing the deal, and you're whatever, you're interested in this topic, the company will give a bunch of money to it, and that will engender some goodwill with the customer or whatever. Those days, I think, are fairly well behind us at this point. And the expectation, just as there's an expectation in the consumer world, and we're making choices as consumers where we spend our money, where we spend our time, based on what we think are the positive externalities of that company. Like, I want to go stay at this hotel brand because I know they're the best employer, or I want to fly this airline, or what have you. Employees are making the same kinds of decisions about which kind of employer they want to work for based on some of these same factors. And so it's really critically important to align what your ESG efforts are, especially if you're going to really try to make an impact in a space. Commit to a space that is correct to your brand, and do it authentically. Like, it can't be free to do it. It has to cost some time. It has to cost some money, and it may even cost some reputational value if you're operating in a space that is polarizing. And so my advice to senior leaders is always to be really sincere and authentic about their selection there, and then follow through with it, fully follow through with that swing. And to the extent that's possible, enlist the efforts of employees, not just the company's checkbooks.
I love how in the report you said that employers need to act like marketing departments. And the takeaway that I had is, treat your employees like customers.
Yeah. And, it's really interesting too, is like, I think a lot, because we do a lot of consulting around communications technologies. And, when we are working on a digital transformation effort, sometimes we're introducing a lot of technology into an organization and replacing an older thing or what have you. And, you think about your consumer experience and just how frictionless it is. I mean, you say, your smart speaker's name, and you want, whatever, some sodas delivered, and bada boom, bada bing, they show up in the morning. And you notice I didn't say her name. Because,
I'm really thankful, because I have one right behind me.
Right. So my kids are starting to call it Aleka. So that's like the code word. Anyway, so but you see how seamless and frictionless your consumer experience is. And you think about, like, okay, well, is the 6 to 12 hours a day I spend at work that seamless and that frictionless? Do I have, like, how many extra clicks do I have to do? And, like, just that alone, like, are things customized to me at all, even in the most basic level? And so, so we have a ton of data about our employees. We can actually create experiences that are really delightful, frictionless, empowering for employees based on what we know about them, make their lives easier to provide the service or create the product or whatever it is that they're doing for our customers. And yet many of our internal systems at organizations are woefully not up to the task.
This has been fascinating, Thomas. I've enjoyed it.
I was going to say I could probably talk all day long, but we got to be mindful of time, because I know you have a hard stop here in a little bit and give you some time to prepare. So I guess the final thought I would have is what's the one takeaway that our listeners, that CEOs all the way down to the kid in college could take away and gain from the knowledge, and hopefully read your entire presentation and then contract y'all.
I mean, I think
this is not a sponsored episode, by the way.
No, it's not a sponsored episode. But
if you would like to sponsor Ethan, let's talk about it.
Yes.
I sure appreciate it. I mean, I guess I would just say, your colleagues, your employees, your workplace is not a homogenous environment. People come with their own identities, and your organization has an identity. And the more those can look like concentric circles, the less cognitive dissonance people will feel, that stress of, like, having to believe two things at once that are in contradiction. The less of that tension and stress they will feel. And that is a huge unlock. So if I really feel like I'm working for a place that sees me, respects me, allows me to be who I am, is interested in what I can genuinely bring to the organization, and doesn't suppress my identity as a father, as a New Yorker, as a writer, as a musician, whatever. If my organization really says, yeah, we want that stuff to line up with who we are, whatever the values are that have been declared, our mission that's been declared, the employee value proposition that's been declared, the tighter alignment you have, the more likely people are just going to unlock their ability to take positive risks, to help out, to innovate, to think differently, and to go the extra mile to create something really special, not just for the clients, but for their other colleagues and the whole company. And it's possible. Like it's like that big sign that John and Yoko put up many years ago. War is over if you want it. And I think crappy workplaces are over if you want it.
I love it. The power is with the people right now. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And we've seen that, the Great Resignation. It's something that's real. People are leaving the jobs, and I don't know, whether it's working remotely or finding an employer that identifies with their values and beliefs. It's incredibly important. And I think it's good to see businesses starting to understand this. And I think, the report and the insights that you guys shared, kind of really highlights that. And so if our listeners out there, maybe they want to ask you additional questions about the, the report, or get in touch with you, maybe for consulting practices, as Thomas says, I don't know. We'll talk about sponsorship later.
There you go. Yeah.
But affiliate program.
What's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Really easy. teamintegral.com. Please come visit us. You can, get our report. It costs nothing. Just sign up for it. We won't spam you either. And then I'm just about the easiest guy to find on the internet too, with the Hebrew first name and an Irish last name, Ethan McCarty. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'd love to connect with you.
Yeah, Ethan, it's been absolutely a blast chatting with you.
Such a pleasure. Yeah, you guys are great.
It's fun. We told you, we'll get you out of here by like 1:30, 1:40 Eastern time. And now we're like, oh no, we are coming up on this hard stop. Well, Ethan, we will definitely have to get you back on some point. And
thank you.
Maybe we could do a TikTok collab with some dancing.
I'm ready to rock. Let's do this.
Well, Ethan, thank you so much for joining us on the Business Communicators. And again, we'll drop the link to the report in the show notes below. So if you're watching this right now on social media, check the iTunes and Spotify show notes, and we'll go from there. But Ethan, thanks so much. We appreciate it.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Ethan.
Well, Thomas, that was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. Ethan crushed it.
Hey, I was going to say, he's a great conversationalist, great storyteller, and he delivers some hard-hitting facts and backs it up with data and says that,
that's the best part.
Your employees are not one mold. You have to think of them as individuals. You have to think of them as collective groups. You can't just say, this is what we're going to do, and everybody get by in line, and you just can't do it. And I thought that was phenomenal.
Yeah, you've got to listen to your employees. I mean, it's no more. I feel like in the day it was always, you've got to stick with the company line, right? You've got to, the company almost instills its values on you. Whereas I feel like now it's the opposite, right? Like the company should reflect the society in which it lives and works. I mean, that's something that we talk about so much, and I think that is truly what we're going to see, and especially as ESG becomes more and more, integrated into society. And just fascinating conversation. So again, we'll drop the show links to, the report in the show notes below.
For whatever reason, your comment right now just made me think of the cartoon that said, the floggings will continue until morale improves. Hopefully that's changing. And yeah, it's not necessarily the power of the employee or the power of the employer. It's we're all in this together, and we have to do the communications. Changing topics a little bit, a good friend of mine, Tom Fishburne, in The Marketunist, did a cartoon last week about the distribution networks and about how the kid's sitting on the thing. I want this. Well, you can't get that by Christmas. Oh, I should ask for that. I can't get that. And this also just brings it full circle that we have to communicate. We have to be open about our communications. That marketing is not just come find us. So I thought that was just very timely into the global ecosphere that we have.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot going on in the world right now, and it's fun to talk about. And again, thanks to Ethan for joining us on the Business Communicators podcast. And we do want to encourage you to follow us on social media at Biz Communicator if you're not following us already. We really want you to get involved there, and then also Kari dropped the link right there to the to the report. So if you want to screen cap that and type it in yourself, or you can just wait till Monday and we'll drop it in the show notes. But follow us on social media. And of course, we want to thank everyone for watching the live stream. If you did watch the live stream on Friday, and again, we're going to continue to do this. Each episode is still going to come out on Spotify and iTunes on Monday mornings at 6 a.m. Eastern or Central. I can't remember what time it comes out. But we will also be doing the live streams on our social platforms Friday generally noon. We can adjust as needed. So thank you for being a part of that. And again, we do encourage you to engage with us. Drop comments, let us know what you like, what you don't like, or you could be like Kari and say, hey, I work at a really cool company and have a report. Do you want to talk to anyone from our company? And we'll say, yeah, absolutely. Now, we're not going to guarantee that we do that all the time, but we like Kari, and she provided Ethan, and Ethan is amazing combo. I thought the chemistry flowed really well.
I did as well. And when you said timing, it just made me think as we work towards the new normal and the hybrid people working in the office people thing, we make sure to drop it in time for you to be able to listen to it if you're going into the office on Monday or Tuesday.
Exactly.
That is our goal. So you have something to listen to that's not morning DJ radio.
Well, hey, Terry, thanks for dropping the comment as well. And yeah, I generally like listening to music in the morning, but podcasts, great. We really encourage you to listen to us. And we look forward to having Hattie back as well for the next episode of the podcast. But special thanks to IBC Houston for sponsoring this episode. If you'd like to sponsor an upcoming show, feel free to reach out to us on social media or shoot me an email, austin@thebusinesscommunicators.com. But Thomas, any parting words before we wrap this up?
No, it's the time of season that's absolutely phenomenal. The fact that we're inside and not doing this podcast outside, I think I might have to do that next Friday, is actually be in my backyard with the background noise, because this is the time of the year where cool evenings, decently warm days, you get to pick whether you want to wear shorts or pants or shorts or long sleeves. So get out, enjoy yourself, push away from your desk, make the rounds, get out, do something, challenge yourself, talk to somebody you haven't talked to in a while. That's my takeaway for the week.
It would not be an episode of the Business Communicators without Thomas bringing up the weather.
If you did not see the window that I have now with a bright blue sky, it's phenomenal right now.
Well, Thomas, it's been great having you on this episode of the podcast. And again, special thanks to Ethan for joining us, and great insights. And we really hope that you enjoyed the conversation this week. And on behalf of my co-host, Thomas Bain, my name's Austin Staton. We'll catch you on the flip side. You like what I did there, kind of changing it up?
Yes. Catch you on the other side. We're still live, so.
Yeah. All right. Take care, everyone. Have a great weekend.